jump directly into it. Like, I would like to know a little bit your background. Where did you grow up, and what led you to pursue a religious and travel path, both of them?
Yeah, I grew up in the United States, and I think I was born to some very adventurous parents. Every summer, my parents would take off on a 3-week road trip around North America. I mean, we visited every state in the United States and most of Canada, and so I I had this adventurous spirit modeled for me by my parents, and I just continued in adulthood, and it's really gotten out of hand.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think it's a common pattern. I heard that a lot. Like, people who lived abroad normally come from families that used to travel,
Yeah.
so that their parents are the ones who started this passion a little bit. What about the religious part? Because you are a Presbyterian pastor, which it's not a most common path to follow. No, you are not in the normal market of work, let's say, like this.
Yeah, in terms of living abroad, I think I was coming up on my 60th birthday, and I thought, I've got just a few years left of work life, and I would like to
Okay.
make these as interesting as possible. I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over
Hmm.
again. And it was about that time that I heard about a church in Switzerland that was looking for a new pastor, and I applied, and and I ended up spending nearly 5 years there.
Nice. So the first time was Switzerland, and it was your first move with 60 years old, which is a big decision to take. It's not an easy one, I suppose. Also.
No, my daughters were grown, and so being empty nesters, it was easier to make that kind of a
Hmm.
move.
Of
Uh,
course.
what wasn't easy was reaching 60 years old and then being required to learn a new language. So,
I can
uh,
imagine. And Swiss, which is even more complex normally for
right, right. It's better to learn a language before you're 10 years old.
but it's never late for anything, no? So better late than never.
I did. I, I'm shocked. I did eventually reach proficiency in standard German. I passed the test, but no, it was a struggle to get there.
Okay, yeah. I lived 4 years in Germany. Not easy either. It's not an easy language for anyone, I think. Like, and it has no. I mean, I would say that it's closer to English than it is for us in Spanish or any Latin language. At least certain words, but the grammatic, it's way too complex. But yeah.
So when I was growing up, everyone was required to choose a language, and so I chose Latin for some reason, which has, I mean, I it was fun and interesting, but it had no practical value.
Well, I don't know. Like, for religious studies, I suppose it is important though. Like.
Yeah, maybe in the traditional Catholic church,
Mm,
but no, not really for me.
okay. So one question that I had in my back of the mind, it was, what is the difference between being a pastor, or what is your job? Was your job in the United States very different from the job that you did in Switzerland, or was it similar in the sense of what you did a day to day?
So very, very similar in most ways, uh, but also quite different, mainly because of the mix of cultures. Um, the church was looking for an English speaking pastor, a native English speaker. So I fit the bill, and what we shared in common in this church was that we were English speakers. But the church had more than 2 dozen nationalities and language groups. So it was very, very diverse. And I think that was what presented the challenge. At meetings where decisions had to be made, we had to work extra hard to understand a cultural point of view. And I mean, I'm proud of myself that we were able to do it, but it was hard work.
can imagine. I mean, it's also part of your work, I assume, no? Like understanding the problems and understanding the cultural backgrounds of these people. So you might be there as a support. Um, but for doing that, you need to be open and be very, or have a very broad culture of how people are.
I've been told, and this makes sense to me, that Presbyterians, people from my religious background, are actually good fits for these international churches because we tend to be open, accepting. We certainly have our own way of doing things, but we all also tend to be open to other ways. Just a little matter of baptism, for example. I'm used to baptizing infants. That would be my tradition. Well, the the people I met in Switzerland had all different approaches to the sacrament of baptism, and I just found it fascinating. I went with it.
Sounds very interesting. I suppose it also enriches you the meeting other people and meeting other ways of doing. It's always a benefit.
I think that military chaplains face the same issue. They may come from a specific tradition, but they are expected to serve people from all different religious backgrounds, and that's a little bit of the way I felt.
Nice. You said something interesting when you said that you arrived to 60 years old. You knew that there was a limited time of working. So it was clear for you that you would retire after, I don't know, 5 years, and then it was just like a temporary move to a country, or at some point you even like considered staying in Switzerland for the rest of your life, for example.
I don't think we ever considered that, mainly because we have children and grandchildren in the U.S., but I have returned twice after retiring. I served 2 more churches, once again in Switzerland, and then for 9 months in The Hague. So it's very difficult to get me to retire. I feel drawn back. And if the telephone rings during our conversation, I will probably say yes.
No problem. So you are always available for for your people, which is great. What is the moment then? Like you said, like you stayed 5 years in Switzerland. When is the moment that you switched to going to Netherlands? What happened there?
Well, my wife and I moved back, and we settled in Michigan. We live in the state of Michigan, and within a year, I received a call. Would you come and help us on a temporary basis? And so I moved back to Luzerne, Switzerland, just for a few months. And then, not much more time went by, and I had a similar opportunity to go to The Hague. And since my grandparents are Dutch, were Dutch immigrants to this country, I was especially interested in living in the Netherlands. Can we talk further about that?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I learned something very important. I've always thought of myself as Dutch. I have a Dutch last name, and just about everybody I know in this community is a descendant of Dutch grandparents. Well, having lived in The Hague for 9 months, I realized I'm not as Dutch as I thought I was. And it's not just that I don't speak the language. It's that I'm so far removed from the Dutch culture, and that became clear to me by living there.
It's interesting, and I think it's kind of a common pattern for like third generation kids or people who grow up in another country. You absorb much more, even if your parents are fully, or even your grandparents are fully from a country. You absorb a lot of the environment where you grow up. No, so you end being more. I feel that after living 4 years in Germany and 3 years and a half in Greece, I do things a little bit more like they would do it than I would do it in back at home in Barcelona. So, do you think there was anything that you absorbed from your time abroad? It's something that you took back home in the US from Switzerland and Netherlands?
Oh, I took a great deal back. There was a great deal that I learned as a result. In fact, I wrote a book about my experience. That's not the one we're getting together to talk about, but um, I think the church in the United States, anyway, is not very diverse, not very multicultural. People tend to stay with their own ethnic and racial groups. But what I observed was the richness of life that was possible when people from diverse backgrounds come together.
Nice. What do you miss the most from Europe? from your time there?
I was just there this past weekend. I wouldn't recommend this a long weekend trip, but I was back in Zurich for the funeral or memorial service for a dear friend. And I was reminded in this very brief visit of how rich the cultural life is in Europe compared to the U.S. And I'm thinking of food, but also architecture and art and so on. I miss that so much.